The bitter October wind howled through the gaps in the weathered barn as Hannah Hartfield curled her swollen body tighter beneath the threadbare blanket she'd claimed from the stagecoach wreckage. Wincing as her 6-month pregnant belly tightened with another practice contraction, she listened to the storm raging outside, wondering how she'd survived the 3 days since the accident that had claimed everyone else aboard. It was 1877, and the Montana Territory was no place for a widow with child and no prospects. Isaac Everett stomped his boots against the porch of his ranch house 5 miles outside of Deer Lodge, Montana, cursing the sudden snowstorm that had blown in unexpectedly from the mountains. At 30 years old, he'd weathered enough Montana winters to know this one had arrived early and mean. His cattle would need checking at first light, assuming the storm let up enough to see beyond his own hand. "Bullet, you stay," he commanded his cattle dog as he pulled his heavy coat tighter. "Need to check the barn one last time." The wind nearly knocked him sideways as he pushed through it toward the barn, lantern swinging wildly and casting eerie shadows across the fresh snow. Inside, the animals shifted restlessly, disturbed by the storm's fury. Isaac moved methodically, checking each stall, ensuring the horses and his milk cow were secure for the night. He almost missed her. A small mound of hay in the corner of the empty stall at the far end moved slightly. Raising his lantern higher, Isaac approached cautiously, his free hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "Who's there?" A woman alone shouldn't trust a stranger so easily unless she was truly desperate. "I've got a warm house and food," he said, pushing through the barn door into the blizzard. "Name's Isaac Everett. This here's my ranch." "Hannah," she managed through chattering teeth. "Hannah Hartfield." Isaac carried her across the yard, fighting the wind with each step. Bullet greeted them at the door, curious about the stranger in his master's arms. "Down, boy," Isaac commanded, kicking the door closed behind him. The warmth of the house enveloped them, and Hannah let out a small sigh of relief. The modest ranch house was clean and orderly, with a roaring fire in the stone hearth. Isaac placed her carefully in the rocking chair closest to the flames. "Let me get you something warm to drink," he said, moving to the stove where a pot of coffee sat warming. Hannah looked around, taking in her surroundings. The house was simple but comfortable, a bachelor's home, clearly, but well kept. Photographs on the mantel showed a younger Isaac with an older couple, presumably his parents. "The accident," Isaac said, returning with a steaming mug of coffee sweetened with honey. "Was it the Butte Line stagecoach?" Hannah nodded, accepting the mug with trembling hands. "Yes, we hit something in the road during that first snowstorm. The driver lost control on the curve. We went over." Her voice broke. "I was thrown clear somehow. The others." "They've been searching for survivors," Isaac said quietly. "Word reached town yesterday about the wreck, but the weather's been too bad for a thorough search." "I walked as far as I could," Hannah explained, her eyes filling with tears. "When I saw your barn, I couldn't go any further." Isaac noticed her hand protectively cradling her belly. "How far along are you, Mrs. Hartfield?" "Almost 7 months, and it's just missed now. My husband died at Appomattox 12 years ago." Isaac's eyebrows rose. "The war? But you couldn't have been more than 16 when we married," she confirmed. "William was 10 years older. The baby," she hesitated, "belongs to a man I was engaged to in St. Louis. He died of influenza 3 months ago." "Can you walk? Or should I carry you?" Hannah attempted to stand but wobbled dangerously. Without waiting for her answer, Isaac scooped her up again and carried her to the bedroom at the back of the house. It was simply furnished with a sturdy pine bed, a chest of drawers, and a small bedside table. "I'll find you something dry to wear," he said, setting her carefully on the edge of the bed. He returned moments later with a clean flannel shirt. "It'll be big, but it's warm and dry." "Thank you," Hannah said, suddenly overcome with emotion. "I don't know what would have happened if—" "No need to think about that," Isaac cut in kindly. "You rest now. I'll be right outside if you need anything." Hannah changed into the offered shirt, which swallowed her frame despite her pregnancy, and slipped under the heavy quilts. The bed was softer than anything she'd felt in weeks, and the clean smell of soap on the linens was comforting. For the first time since the accident, she felt safe. Sleep claimed her almost instantly. In the main room, Isaac paced, debating what to do. The woman in his bed was clearly in a desperate situation. Once the storm cleared, he'd need to ride into Deer Lodge to notify the sheriff about the survivor and arrange for a doctor to check on her. But something about her story didn't sit quite right with him. What was a pregnant woman doing traveling alone on a stagecoach through Montana in October? The howling wind made his decision for him. No one was going anywhere tonight, and tomorrow wouldn't likely be any better. For now, the woman and her unborn child were his responsibility. Isaac woke with a start, unsure what had disturbed his sleep. Then he heard it again, a soft cry from the bedroom. He grabbed his revolver out of habit and moved quickly to the door, knocking softly. "Madam? Hannah? You all right?" A muffled sob was his only answer. He pushed the door open slowly. Hannah was sitting up in bed, arms wrapped around her middle, rocking slightly. "What is it? The baby?" he asked, setting the gun down and approaching cautiously. "Just pains," she gasped. "They come and go. Doctor in St. Louis said they're normal. Practice contractions." Isaac ran a hand through his hair. "Can I get you anything? Water? More blankets?" "A wife?" she asked, looking around the tidy room. "No wife. No family except a cousin back east I write to at Christmas." He smiled faintly. "Just me and Bullet, my dog, and about 300 head of cattle." "Sounds peaceful," Hannah murmured. "Mostly, though lonely at times," he admitted, surprised at his own candor. "What brought you to Montana, if you don't mind my asking?" Hannah was quiet for a moment, the pain seemingly subsided. "A teaching position. Deer Lodge needs a schoolteacher, and I needed a fresh start." "You're the new schoolmarm?" Isaac asked, surprised. "Town's been waiting on you. School's been closed since Miss Jenkins left to get married last spring. They knew I was coming, but not." She gestured to her belly. "I didn't tell them about the baby. I was afraid they wouldn't hire me." "Ah," Isaac nodded, understanding dawning. "And they're expecting a widow, not an unmarried mother." Hannah's eyes filled with tears again. "My fiancé, Edward, and I were to be married before anyone would notice. When he died, I was already carrying his child. My parents disowned me. The teaching position was my only option." Isaac considered this information carefully. An unmarried schoolteacher with a child would face serious obstacles in a small frontier town like Deer Lodge. The school board, made up primarily of the town's most conservative citizens, would likely dismiss her immediately. "Well," he said finally, "that's a problem for another day. For now, you need to rest and heal." Hannah looked at him gratefully. "You're very kind, Mr. Everett." "Isaac," he corrected, "and I'm just doing what any decent person would do." But as he returned to his makeshift bed by the fire, Isaac knew that wasn't entirely true. There was something about Hannah Hartfield that stirred protective instincts he hadn't known he possessed. The storm raged for 3 more days, trapping them in the ranch house. During that time, Hannah regained some of her strength, and Isaac found himself enjoying her company more than he cared to admit. She was well-educated and quick-witted, with a quiet determination that impressed him. Each morning, he insisted she remain in his bed while he tended to the necessary chores around the ranch. Each evening, They shared simple meals and conversation by the fire. On the morning of the fourth day, the sun finally broke through the clouds. Isaac stood on the porch, surveying the damage. Drifts of snow stood taller than a man in places, but the road to town would likely be passable by the following day. Hannah joined him on the porch, wrapped in a quilt. "It's beautiful," she said, gazing at the snow-covered landscape glittering in the sunlight. "Deadly beautiful," Isaac replied. "That storm could have killed you if you'd stayed in that barn." Hannah placed her hand on his arm. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. It's just until you get settled and the baby comes. By then, you'll have proven yourself as a teacher, and maybe the town won't be so quick to judge." Hannah wiped her eyes. "Yes, thank you." The following day, Isaac hitched his strongest horses to the sleigh and helped Hannah into the seat beside him. The journey into Deer Lodge was slow and cold, but the main road had been partially cleared by other travelers. Deer Lodge in 1877 was still a small but growing town, with a main street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple rising above the rest. The arrival of the sleigh drew curious glances from townsfolk clearing snow from their doorways. "Doc Miller's office is there?" Isaac said, pointing to a white-clapboard building with a small sign. "I'll take you there first, then see the sheriff about the stagecoach." Doc Miller was a gruff man in his 60s with kind eyes that had seen too much suffering. He examined Hannah thoroughly while Isaac waited in the outer office. Finally, they made their way to the schoolhouse, where Mr. Thompson, the head of the school board, kept his dry goods store. The bell above the door jingled as they entered, and a thin man with spectacles looked up from behind the counter. "Isaac Everett. Haven't seen you in town for weeks. This storm's been something fierce, hasn't it?" "That it has, Hiram," Isaac replied, helping Hannah remove her coat. "I'd like you to meet my cousin, Hannah Hartfield. She arrived during the storm." Hiram Thompson's eyes widened with recognition. "Miss Hartfield, we'd nearly given up on you." "Well, this is unexpected. The school board will need to discuss." "Discuss what?" Isaac interrupted, his voice hardening slightly. "Whether a qualified teacher who happens to be carrying her late husband's child is fit to teach your children." Hannah graduated at the top of her class in St. Louis. She taught there for 5 years with glowing recommendations. "It's not that simple, Isaac," Thompson protested weakly. "There are standards of moral conduct that we—" "Moral conduct?" Isaac's voice rose slightly. "Hiram, your children haven't had proper schooling for nearly a year because you can't keep a teacher in this town. My cousin is a respectable widow who needs this position, and your town needs her skills." Hannah placed a restraining hand on Isaac's arm. "Mr. Thompson," she said gently, "I understand your concerns. All I ask is an opportunity to prove myself. If, after a month of teaching, you find my work or conduct unsatisfactory, I will resign without protest." Thompson looked between them, clearly uncomfortable. "The school term was meant to begin last week. When could you start?" Students who had been indifferent to education began to show improvement, and even the most skeptical parents had to admit she was a gifted teacher. At the ranch, she and Isaac fell into a comfortable routine. Hannah insisted on contributing, taking over the cooking and helping with lighter chores despite her advancing pregnancy. Isaac found himself looking forward to evenings by the fire, listening to Hannah read aloud or simply talking about their days. As November turned to December, Hannah's due date approached. Isaac enlarged the bedroom, adding a small nursery alcove. He surprised Hannah with a handcrafted cradle, made from pine he'd harvested and dried himself. "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "You didn't have to do this." "Wanted to," Isaac said simply. "Every child deserves a proper place to sleep." Hannah looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Isaac, I don't know how I'll ever repay you for all of this. There's nothing to repay, he insisted. I told you, having you here has been good for me too. You've become quite popular, he observed as he helped her into the sleigh. They're wonderful children, Hannah replied, wincing slightly as she settled onto the seat. Pain again? He asked, noticing her discomfort. Just the usual. This little one is running out of room, she said, patting her belly which now seemed impossibly large. Halfway back to the ranch, Hannah gasped suddenly, clutching Isaac's arm. What is it? He asked, alarmed. I think my water just broke, she said, her voice tight with fear. Isaac looked at the snow-filled road ahead and the darkening sky. They were still 3 miles from home, and at least 5 from town and the doctor. Hold on, he told her, snapping the reins to urge the horses faster. By the time they reached the ranch, Hannah was breathing hard through regular contractions. Isaac carried her inside and placed her on the bed, then built up the fire and put water on to boil. I need to go for the doctor, he said, but Hannah grabbed his arm. There's no time, she gasped. This is happening too fast. First babies aren't supposed to come this quickly. Isaac ran a hand through his hair, panic threatening to overwhelm him. I don't know how to deliver a baby, Hannah. She managed a strained smile. Cattle, horses, babies, how different can it be? Very different, he muttered. But he began gathering clean linens and more water as Hannah instructed between contractions. The labor progressed rapidly. Isaac sent up silent prayers for guidance as he helped Hannah through each contraction, wiping her brow, holding her hands, and encouraging her when she thought she couldn't continue. I see the head, he exclaimed as midnight approached. Hannah, you need to push now. With a cry that tore at Isaac's heart, Hannah bore down. Minutes later, a tiny, slippery form slid into Isaac's waiting hands. It's a boy, he said in wonder as the infant let out a lusty cry. A perfect, healthy boy. Tears streamed down Hannah's face as Isaac placed the swaddled newborn in her arms. Hello, little one, she whispered. Welcome to the world. Isaac sat beside them, exhausted but filled with a strange sense of completion, as he watched Hannah count tiny fingers and toes. Something had happened during those intense hours, a bond formed that went beyond their convenient arrangement. What will you name him? Isaac asked softly. Hannah looked up, her eyes meeting his. William Edward Hartfield, she said, after his grandfather's. Isaac nodded, ignoring the irrational pang of disappointment that the child wouldn't carry his name. Of course he wouldn't, the boy wasn't his. Except that somewhere in the past weeks, Isaac had begun to wish that this improvised family could become real. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. Isaac had slept in the chair beside Hannah's bed, waking every time she or the baby stirred. He rose quietly, built up the fire, and went to milk the cow, returning with fresh milk for Hannah. She was awake, nursing little William with a look of tired contentment. Merry Christmas, Isaac said softly, setting the milk on the bedside table. Merry Christmas, she replied. I'm afraid I don't have a gift for you. Isaac smiled, nodding toward the baby. You've given this house the best gift possible. Life. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. You've given us so much more. A home. Safety. She hesitated. Isaac, I've been thinking. Once I'm recovered, perhaps we should look for a small house in town. I don't want to impose on you indefinitely. Isaac felt as though the temperature in the room had dropped. You're not imposing. I told you you can stay as long as you need. That's just it, Hannah said, shifting the baby to her shoulder. I don't want to stay because I need to. That's not fair to you. Isaac sat on the edge of the bed, gathering his courage. What if I need you to stay? Hannah looked up, surprised. What do you mean? I mean, Isaac said carefully, "that these past weeks with you here have been the happiest of my life. The house isn't the only thing that feels different better with you in it. I'm different. Isaac, I know our arrangement was just a story," he continued quickly, "but sometimes stories can become true if we want them to badly enough. I'm not asking for anything you don't want to give. Just the chance to see if what I'm feeling might be something you could feel too, in time." Hannah was quiet for so long that Isaac began to regret his words. Then, still cradling the baby, she reached for his hand. "When the stagecoach crashed," she said softly, "I thought it was the end of everything. I had no family, no future, nothing but a baby who would be born with the weight of scandal already on his tiny shoulders." She squeezed Isaac's hand. "Instead, I found you, and you've shown me more kindness and respect than any man I've ever known. Is that a yes?" Isaac asked, hardly daring to hope. "It's a beginning," Hannah replied. "A real one, not a convenient story." Isaac brought her hand to his lips. "That's all I ask." As winter gave way to spring, Hannah and William remained at the ranch. Isaac formally courted her, bringing small gifts when he drove her to and from the schoolhouse, reading to William in the evenings while Hannah prepared lessons. Their friendship deepened into something more, nurtured by shared responsibilities and quiet moments of connection. The townsfolk gradually accepted the altered version of their story that Isaac and his widowed cousin had developed feelings for each other while she recovered from the stagecoach accident and the birth of her son. A few raised eyebrows greeted the announcement of their engagement in April, but most were simply happy to see the confirmed bachelor finally settling down. They married in June, a simple ceremony in the Deer Lodge Church with William, now 6 months old, watching wide-eyed from Mrs. Thompson's arms. Hannah wore a dress of pale blue, refusing the traditional white out of respect for her supposed late husband. "I never thought I'd have this," she confessed to Isaac that night as they stood on the porch of their ranch house, now truly their home. "A second chance." Isaac wrapped his arms around her, drawing her close. "I never thought I'd want it until I found you sleeping in my barn." Hannah laughed softly, leaning into his embrace. "That was either the worst luck or the best luck of my life." "I vote for best," Isaac murmured, kissing her temple. Inside, William stirred in his cradle, and they went to him together, no longer a woman alone with her child and a lonely rancher, but a family forged from chance and choice and love that had grown quietly but unshakably between them. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she said. "This life we're building, it's everything I never dared to dream of. Even with all the hard work," Isaac teased. Ranching was never easy, and Hannah still maintained her teaching position despite her pregnancy. "Especially with the hard work," she replied seriously. "Everything precious comes at a cost. The question is whether what you gain is worth the price you pay." "And is it?" Isaac asked. "Worth it?" Hannah leaned over to kiss him, a gesture that still sent warmth spreading through him like sunlight. "1,000 times yes." As summer turned to fall and their second anniversary approached, Hannah gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth Grace. The ranch prospered under Isaac's careful management, allowing them to hire help so Hannah could continue teaching. William grew into a sturdy toddler with his mother's hazel eyes and a curiosity that kept them both constantly vigilant. On the 5th anniversary of the day Isaac found Hannah in his barn, they stood together looking out over their land. The ranch had expanded, now encompassing the neighboring property Isaac had purchased the previous year. A new, larger house stood where the original cabin had been, with room for their growing family. William, Elizabeth, and twin boys Robert and Richard, just learning to walk. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if you hadn't checked the barn that night?" Hannah asked, leaning against his shoulder. Isaac considered the question seriously. "I'd still be alone. The house would be quiet, and I'd never know what I was missing. And I'd likely not be here at all," Hannah said softly. Nor would William. Isaac tightened his arm around her waist. Then I'm grateful every day that I'm a cautious rancher who checks his barns during blizzards. Hannah laughed, the sound still as sweet to his ears as it had been the first time he'd heard it. As am I, Isaac Everett. As am I. Inside the house, one of the twins began to cry, quickly followed by the other. Hannah sighed, but the smile never left her face. Duty calls. Isaac caught her hand as she turned to go. I love you, Hannah Everett. Every day more than the last. Her eyes softened, the love in them as clear as the day they'd married. And I love you, my rescuer, my home. Together they walked back into the house, no longer a shelter from a storm, but the heart of a family that had found its beginning in the most unexpected of places. 10 years after that fateful night, the Everett Ranch had become one of the most successful in the county. Isaac and Hannah stood side by side at William's 15th birthday celebration, watching with pride as he showed his younger siblings how to properly rope a calf. He looks more like his father every day, Isaac observed quietly. Hannah squeezed his hand. He looks like you, she corrected, in all the ways that matter. And it was true. William had grown up calling Isaac Pa with no knowledge of the man whose blood he carried. To him and all the other Everett children, this was simply their family, and the story of how their mother had been found in the barn during a blizzard was just a favorite tale, the beginning of their parents' love story. That night, after the children were asleep, Hannah found Isaac on the porch, looking up at the stars. Penny for your thoughts, she said, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the October chill. Just thinking about how full the house is now, he replied, making room for her on the bench. Remember how quiet it used to be? Too quiet, Hannah said, though sometimes I miss being able to hear myself think. Isaac chuckled. They'll be grown and gone before we know it. Don't remind me, Hannah sighed. William already talks about wanting to see California someday. He'll come back, Isaac said confidently. This is home. Hannah rested her head against his shoulder, a familiar gesture that still filled him with contentment. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For finding me, for bringing me into your home, for loving William as your own, for our family. She looked up at him. For everything. Isaac kissed her gently. No thanks needed. You gave me the world, Hannah Everett. Everything before you was just waiting. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the lives played out beneath them. But to Isaac and Hannah, their story begun in desperation and necessity, transformed by kindness and courage, and sustained by love freely given and gratefully received, was the center of the universe. A complete world unto itself, where a chance encounter in a snowy barn had sparked a lifetime of happiness neither had dared to imagine possible. And in the years that followed, as their children grew and had families of their own, the story was told and retold how a pregnant woman sleeping in a barn and the cowboy who found her had built something beautiful from the harshest of beginnings. A testament to the truth that sometimes, the greatest journeys begin not with careful planning but with a single act of compassion in the midst of a storm.